expression is useful if you want to compare two fields inside of one document and then find all documents where this comparison returns a certain result. Too abstract? Let's see what it does. Let's say we have a financial data database, and there I'll quickly prepare a collection, sales, and I'll insert many sales. Whoops, with square brackets. Now the first item has, let's say, a volume of 100 and a target of 120. The next item has a volume of 89 and a target of 80. And I have another item where the volume is 200 and a target of 177. So now I inserted 3 entries here. We can quickly check them out with find and then printing. So these are the 3 entries. Now let's say we want to find all entries, all items in this collection where the volume is above the target. This is a typical use case where expression can help us. Now how do we use that? We use it as such. We access our sales collection, and now in there I specify my filtered document, and I first of all use expr, which is this expression operator. Now expr takes a document describing the expression. You can then use a couple of comparison operators like GT. Now, by the way, check out the official docs to learn more about valid expressions and which operators you can use there. So GT is one. Now here I pass an array, and it will basically compare all these fields. Now, the interesting thing here is I won't enter values manually to find out which one is the greater item, because that's pretty redundant. Instead, here we now reference names of fields in our data. Now, in our data, remember, we have volume and target as fields. Now, you don't enter volume and target like this. This would be invalid. Instead, you wrap them in quotation marks. You wrap the data in quotation marks, like this, volume and target. So now it would compare volume and target and only find documents where volume is greater than target. However, this would still not work, because right now it would still treat this as a hard input from your side. So basically as a string, and it would compare if volume is greater than target, and it would return everything, because from an alphabetic perspective, this is true. And that's probably also nice to know that greater than does work here too. If we want to refer to the field names, we have to add a $sign at the beginning. This tells MongoDB, hey, please look at the volume field and use the value of that in this expression. And you can't use that in every place in your queries. It does work on the expression query though. And later in the aggregation framework module, you'll find more places where you can use that. So now we're referring to the field names. And if I now hit enter, I only find 2 documents where the volume indeed is higher than the target. The first document, where that was not the case, is not included in the result subset. And that is, of course, super useful, because with this dynamic approach, we have an easy time of fetching the data where some condition within the document is met. So where 2 kind of related fields have a certain kind of relation that we check here. Now there also is a more complex form of expression. Let's say we don't just want to compare whether volume is greater than target, but let's say if the volume is above 190, the difference to target has to be at least 10. So we should still find this document. The difference is only 9 here, but it's also not greater than 190. For this, however, we should also still find it, because it will be greater than 190, and the difference will then be greater than 10 to target. But how will we write this? For this, you have to adjust the part inside your greater than, or whatever your condition here is. The first value will now be a document, and there you use a special $cont operator, which is related to expression. So this cont is related to this expression. So both can work in tandem. The condition allows you to specify a document that describes a conditional value which it will derive here. So remember, we're still looking for a value we can use as a first element in our greater than array, and we just want to calculate that value dynamically. For that, in that cont document, we first of all specify a condition with if, and that has to be named if. If is then another comparison operator. So here we can check for, let's say, greater than or equal. Again, we have two values in here, and we want to check whether volume is greater than or equal to 190. Now, if this is met, then make sure to place the comma correctly after a closing square bracket and curly brace. Then we have a certain value we want to use. So this indeed is named then. And we can either hard code a value here, or we calculate it dynamically. Now here we can calculate it dynamically by passing another document and use subtract, which is an operator you can use to subtract two values. You specify an array, and you could hard code values to subtract these two values from each other. And by the way, subtract and so on, these are all aggregation pipeline operators. So no worries if that is a lot right now. In the aggregation framework module, this will all become a bit clearer and also easier. So subtract will subtract the second element we specify in this array from the first element. Now what I want to do here is essentially, I want to subtract 10 from volume so that the volume I use for a comparison is reduced by 10. So here, I will use volume as a first element, and then I subtract 10, hard-coded in there. Okay, so I subtract 10 from the value that is stored in the volume for all the items where the volume is greater than 190. Now that is one case. Now let's add an else case, because what is the case for items where the volume is not greater than or equal to 190? Well, there, I'll simply just use the volume without any changes, like this. So now we finished our condition, and that is the first value in our array here. So the first value is now simply either the volume, or if the volume is greater than or equal to 190, it's the volume minus 10. So for our volume of 200, we'll compare one of 190. Now the value we compare it to, and now I'm in the array related to the greater than operator, the value I will compare it to still is target here. Now if I hit enter, I do find the same set of data as before. But this will change if I switch the 10, which I subtract from my volume, to let's say 20, that I require a difference between volume to 30, that I require a difference of volume to target of 30 if the volume is 190 or higher. Now I only get back this element with a volume of 89, because it's not as high, it's not making it into this comparison here. And therefore I take the volume unchanged to compare it to the target value. But for this document, the volume is 200, hence it makes it into this condition and into this then block. Therefore, the volume I take for comparison is reduced by 30, and that is then not greater than the target of 177 anymore, because 200 minus 30 is of course 107. Now, this is a quite complex case here. And this is also not a query you might be running all the time, but it can be very helpful. Now, for all the comparison and change operators which we used in there, again, this is something you'll also see in the aggregation framework module, and it is something where you can dive into the official docs to see all possible values there. This is a quite powerful command, and therefore definitely worth playing around with. But for now, I just wanted to explain how it generally works and how you have to think about it.